The following is sponsored by our friends and community supporters at McNeese Wheeler Attorneys. McNeese Wheeler is a boutique law firm in Spokane, handling matters in both Washington and Idaho. Areas of law include business law, wills, trusts and estates, family law, personal injury and wrongful death, and real estate matters. For your full-service legal needs, contact McNeese Wheeler Attorneys. Welcome to On the JoB with your host, Linn Parish, editor of the Journal of Business. On the JoB is about the Inland Northwest business community, where you'll hear firsthand the backstories from the men and women reporters at the Journal of Business. On the JoB is brought to you in part by McNeese Wheeler Attorneys. Here's Linn.
Hi, welcome to On the JoB. I'm Linn Parish, the editor of the Journal of Business, and I'm here today with LeAnn Bjerken, the reporter, finance reporter at the Journal. Welcome, LeAnn.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming down. Yeah. Now, as LeAnn and I are recording now, it's the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, 2 days before Black Friday, and we're here today to talk about holiday retail. LeAnn, you've written a couple of stories on this subject over the last few weeks. So tell me, what are Spokane area retailers projecting for holiday sales this year?
So the story we did this time around, a couple editions ago, was back in about mid-October. We had kind of heard about this idea of shoppers wanting to get out ahead of some of these bigger events like Black Friday. So the purpose in the story was kind of to touch base with some of our retailers here in town and find out what they were expecting in terms of early shoppers. So you had a couple that, we're seeing some holiday shoppers already in October, but not quite as many as what national retailers were expecting to see ahead of larger events.
Sure.
So this year it sounded to me from most of the people that I talked to like they're kind of expecting similar increases to what we saw last year, around that 2 to 4% range of increases in overall retail sales for holidays.
Through the holiday season. Yeah, that's interesting. It seems like the season gets extended. Everybody complains about Christmas decorations in Target before Halloween and that sort of thing. But really, it's a pretty natural expansion that's happened in that arena. So how has what you've been hearing locally meshed with what's been reporting on the national level in terms of retail sales?
Well, locally it seems like a lot of the retailers here are more your specialty shops that carry items that you can't necessarily get anywhere else.
Right.
We're not really the same dynamic as the national scene, I guess you could say.
Sure.
So in terms of early shoppers, we get a lot more of the out-of-towners looking for special gifts or that kind of thing early in the season. I think the colder weather also plays a part, where people start thinking about Christmas, thinking about ideas, and they just kind of naturally gravitate towards, oh, well, I've got a free weekend. I'd like to start my Christmas shopping list. So it sounded like a lot of the retailers here are seeing that kind of customer come in the early months for that kind of shopping experience.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Earlier this week, we had the taxable retail sales report come in from the state, and it lags quite a bit, but so it's only the second quarter of this year. But the numbers bode well for retail sales going into the holiday season. In Spokane, if you looked at overall taxable retail sales, they came in at a 7.5% increase, 7.4% increase in the second quarter of this year compared to the second quarter of last year. And then if you looked at retail sales only, it was about 5% of an increase in sales in the second quarter, once again compared to the year earlier quarter. So that certainly bodes well for the prime shopping season that we're about to enter. Now, we talked about the fact that we're recording this a couple days before Black Friday, and you reported on a survey that Washington State University did about shopping habits going into the holiday season, and a lot of that revolved around Black Friday. What did that survey find, and what did you find when you were reporting on it?
So the survey was done by WSU's Carson College of Business.
Sure.
And it was kind of these researchers that wanted to find out how people's attitudes towards Black Friday have started to change. And what they found was that a lot of their survey respondents, they surveyed probably, I think it was around 1,000 residents of the Pacific Northwest
Sure.
States in that area. And they had found that a lot of them are actually planning to not shop for Black Friday because they'd like to avoid crowds or spend more time with family. Maybe they feel like they could get the same or a better discount at another time of the year, just kind of all these different reasons. So part of the survey's intention was to find out, well, if people aren't shopping in store on Black Friday, what else are they doing, or why might they prefer to shop at a different time of the year?
Sure. You know, it's interesting because if you look at the study numbers, I think it was somewhere around, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it was around 35% of people were planning on shopping for Black Friday.
Yes.
And I guess there's two ways of looking at that. On one hand, 2/3 of the people aren't planning on it. But on the other hand, if you have literally 35% of the people in the inland Northwest, if you literally extrapolate that out, that's still tens of thousands of people busting down the doors at the retail stores on those days. So it's pretty interesting. The other thing about the study that struck me is that in the data that we had, there wasn't any comparative data, so it was hard to tell whether that was a decline in shopping on Black Friday or where it's always been. So one other thing that we've seen, though, is that Black Friday sales, as you suggested, have been extended some from more than just that one day. Isn't that right?
Yeah, it's kind of this mentality of, well, you've got practically 4 days to shop, so why
Sure.
not just kind of drag it all out over the whole weekend? But yeah, it does sound like people are becoming a bit more conscious of, I'd rather spend that time with family or outdoors, so what are my other options for still getting that great discount without actually having to physically go to the store and attend some event with a bunch of crowds, and maybe they won't even have what I was looking for.
Sure,
Okay.
sure. That was one of the interesting things that the researcher pointed out, was that people have the perception that they don't have to go on Black Friday, that they can get a similar deal at another point during the holiday season. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, let's talk a little bit about online shopping versus in-store shopping.
Okay.
All right.
The following is sponsored by our friends and community supporters at McNeese Wheeler Attorneys. McNeese Wheeler is a boutique law firm in Spokane, handling matters in both Washington and Idaho. Areas of law include business law, wills, trusts and estates, family law, personal injury and wrongful death, and real estate matters. For your full-service legal needs, contact McNeese Wheeler Attorneys.
Hi, welcome back to On the JoB with me, Linn Parish, and her, LeAnn Bjerken. So, we're talking about holiday shopping. Have you started any of yours yet, or?
No, I have not.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. I'm the same.
Terrible.
But one of the things, and going a little bit off script here, but one of the things that I've heard in reporting about holiday shopping in the past is, in certain years, you have 5 weekends between the Thanksgiving and
Yep.
Christmas. And so this year, just barely, we have that 5-weekend dynamic. So we have a little bit more time this year to get our shopping done. We also have the advantage of doing some online shopping if we choose to do so. What did the survey that you reported on say about shoppers' habits?
Well, it was kind of interesting because they had asked people, first off, how likely is it that you're going to be shopping online versus in store? And the majority of people seem to think that they'd be doing most of their shopping online, but they still had this desire to go out there and support local businesses
Sure.
and shop in store as well. But there seemed to be kind of this disconnect of people's awareness of, well, how often do I actually go down to the store and purchase my item versus just purchasing online? So they didn't really seem to be quite as aware of just how much online shopping they really do when it comes to the entirety of their list.
Sure. And as you allude to, it's a mix of online and in store that they're probably looking at. But the survey itself addressed Amazon.com directly. Do you have any of the information that they had about people's habits in terms of Amazon?
From what I recall, Amazon was the main retailer that the majority of people had listed as their top store that they were planning to shop at.
Sure. Yeah, and when we talk about this survey, we're talking about, you mentioned that it was the Pacific Northwest, and if I remember correctly, they talked to people in Washington, Idaho, Oregon, and then also parts of
California and Montana, yeah.
and British Columbia, right?
Yep,
Yeah,
that too.
yeah. So it'll be interesting to see if they do this survey again and to see how the numbers compare next year to this one in terms of people's shopping habits. And we've talked a little bit about online shopping, but we've also seen a little bit of an expansion of brick and mortar store options in the Spokane area over the last year or so. Isn't that right?
That's right. If you just look at downtown, we have
Sure.
The new Carhartt store, Urban Outfitters, Pendleton just opened up in the mall down that way, and then you have things going on at the former Macy's building, now
Right.
the M, where they're planning to do the first couple of floors of retail shops as well.
Right.
So we might get some new interesting things down there. The thing that I've found interesting is that I feel like a lot of these stores that are coming to town now are those, again, specialty kind of items or really popular brands that people are going to want to shop at anyway, I feel like.
Sure. And in the stores that you mentioned, when you think about Carhartt and Pendleton, Urban Outfitters to a degree, what you're looking at is stores that may have had a pretty strong online sales presence in
Exactly.
the Spokane area before. So, yeah.
And it might also be that some of these stores we've seen that they're working more at their online presence. And specifically in one of my last stories, River Park Square had talked about working with Nordstrom with one of their apps to kind of help drag in those online customers that are using an app for their shopping and seeing ideas and wanting to know, what's new.
Sure. Now, I'm glad you brought that up because I had forgotten about that aspect of the story. So with that Nordstrom app, was it, please refresh my memory and our viewers, was it mostly to address inventory that was available in the store, or was it talking about times that the store is busier than others, or?
I didn't look too much further into it, but I thought that it was probably a combination of both.
Sure.
Where you're able to use the app to contact someone who actually works in the store and kind of have almost your own personal style consultant to help say, these are the items I'm interested in, this is my size, what is currently there, can I get a picture?
Yeah.
Kind of
Oh,
thing.
that's great. That makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense to me. That's great. It sounds like a pretty promising retail season in the Spokane area and the inland Northwest. What else are you working on right now, LeAnn? Anything you'd like to mention?
Not retail related, really. I do feel like some of these new technologies are kind of exciting, how they're relating to retail sales and really all other kinds of industries. When you're looking at how to best interact with your customer base, there's some really new, creative, cool things happening.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, thanks for your time today. It's always interesting to hear what's going on in the retail sector. We'll have to do this again after the holidays, if not about retail, about something else. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. That's all we have for today. We'll be back with you soon.
On the JoB is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. On the JoB is brought to you by our friends at McNeese Wheeler Attorneys. Ask Lynn a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com.